So the theme of this user group is analyze, uncover insights. And I thought we just dive into that a little bit. It's a nice succinct saying, analyze, uncover insights. We read it all over the place. But what does it actually mean? And I'll start off with a little example. We have a digital marketing expert that works for us and analyzes our Google data. And he's a relatively young guy and really knows what he's doing. And he said to me, I don't understand why, and I know that he was referring to my age group, you guys with gray hair, always think you can trust your gut. Don't trust your gut, you need to trust the data. Now, personally, I can trust data, but I have to verify it. I have to really verify it a few times before I'll trust it. Internally, we use a program called Instinctive Drives, and we do a profile of all of our leadership teams, our team leaders and our management. And Instinctive Drives indicates, based on a number of questions, where you fit into the scale of these four instinctive drives. And the first drive is the drive to verify. And you can see there that I'm an 8 on a logarithmic scale, which means I'm 10 times more likely to verify than somebody on a 7. Never mind comparing me to somebody that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So very much a verifier of data. We have a lot of these people in our teams, so we're working with data all the time, and we do have a tendency to try and verify it. So I wanted to have a look and see why data analysis is important. Why are we doing data analysis? What are we looking for? And essentially, we're looking for insights that the data will give us, and to see whether our original proposition that we made using our gut instinct is correct or incorrect, and looking for ways in which we can enhance efficiency in our businesses by utilizing those insights. The insights themselves are divided into a number of different types of insights. So you have descriptive insights, which is simply the status quo, the current state. You have causal insights, which is cause and effect. You have predictive insights, which means you're looking at the history, your historical data, and trying to work out what's going to happen in the future. And then you have prescriptive insights, which suggest specific actions or strategies based on your analysis. So insights don't really just fall into a single category. Some of them are more important than others in looking at improving efficiency in your business. You also have a lot more data than you think. So in the case of MYOB Advanced, even though you don't have direct access to the SQL database, you do have the opportunity to do generic inquiries, which Kimay will be talking about a little bit later. You've got Google Analytics if you've got any sort of web presence or digital marketing. Your simple phone records, your debtors ledger, your creditors ledger, all of these are data sources that you can use and interrogate when you're looking for these insights. And even to the extent of computer logs, when we did the session yesterday, Wayne showed a new function in the EXO software, which actually makes this computer data that's automatically being accumulated in the back end much more visible. And of course, you can do the same in Advanced by pulling that out. This is an extreme example where a woman was fired after work from home monitoring. A little bit exaggerated, because in actual fact, this was just your normal logging in the back end, and she hadn't logged in for about 4 days and so on. And then, of course, the other data you can get from government and institutions, Bureau of Statistics, and so on and so on. So a lot of data, probably too much data, probably more data than you need if you go scratching and looking for it. Because I'm such a verifier of data, I do like to look at very granular data. And I've always had the approach that as long as you've got enough storage space, which today is clearly not a problem because storage is very, very cheap, I like to accumulate data in a very granular fashion, just on the off chance that I might at some point in the future need the data. And it's much easier to concatenate data than it is to deconcatenate data. Those of you that came off MYOB account right or MYOB Premier will remember that the addresses were distilled into a single line. So if you wanted to do an analysis to see the behavior of clients in a particular state or suburb or postcode, you couldn't do it without going through this deconcatenation. So I do like to look at data when I'm making the decision to store data. I do like to break it up into these discrete cells, if you like, in a database. But we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about clean data and how you get clean data and how important that is. Verification of data, a lot of techniques nowadays that make that much more simple. For example, to use the same example of the addresses, there are APIs now available into address databases where you can actually verify that the address you're typing in is an actual address that exists in either the Australian or New Zealand postal databases. Also to be aware of changes in behavior over time when you're looking at data. So the fact that you verified your data and got an insight 2 years ago may no longer be valid in this fast-moving world of ours. This is an example of our own website, which is post-COVID, and I was somewhat surprised to see that post-COVID, 88% of people visiting our website are actually coming from a mobile phone. Whereas my impression of people visiting our website would be the CEO or the CFO sitting at their desk and browsing on, probably my age group, we're still Internet Explorer, but browsing on, let's say, Chrome or Edge. That's no longer valid. Most people are sitting on the train visiting my website either on the way to or from work. A few other observations about common errors in analysis. And interestingly enough, I had learned something through these user groups we've been through, and Ken, who's with us today, had made a comment that really made me think about data in a different way. But we're looking at the three concepts of relevance, accuracy, and precision. And it's important to think about, when you're thinking about your data, it's important to think about it in these three terms. So relevance, is it significant in the context that you're looking at? Accuracy, is it correct or true? And finally, precision. Precision, talk about standard deviation from the mean, and I'll illustrate that to you in a moment when we talk about visualization of data. So the first one is relevance. As an example, if you're making a decision about restocking or about inventory, this is the type of information you might look at. This is the type of information you need. But you would not need, for example, the customer name. The customer name would be irrelevant for that, so you can ignore it, and you can declutter your data when you're looking for these insights. Also, in the context of what you're looking for, another example of relevance, I picked this up off our own website. We saw an 11% increase in searches. Thought that was fantastic until we realized that this was the number of people searching Kilimanjaro with the intention of climbing the mountain. So actually had the opposite insight to what I was expecting to see when I only looked at the data. This is a bad insight. The second one, as I said, was the accuracy of data, and make sure that the data is accurate, but only as accurate as you need. So if you want to know what the apple weighs, you can say an apple weighs about 150 grams. That's all you need to know. You don't need to go and know to 8 decimal places. This is very important when you're dealing with units of inventory, because with the mathematical calculation of an average starts giving you data to decimal points, which is pretty irrelevant. And the third one is precision. Do you need to know what the weight of the apple is to 2 decimal places? Probably not. So you can go back to looking at the original data, which was relevant. And then this concept of something that can be precise, not accurate, if your means of measuring it is not correct. So on my electronic scale, which hasn't been calibrated, the apple weighs 233 grams, but in reality, it weighs more or less 150 grams. So my data that was precise is much less relevant than the data that was accurate. I spoke about visualization. I find this quite useful, where instead of just simply looking at numbers, you can look at what's called a normal distribution, which is in the shape of a bell curve. And I can say most of my clients bought between 6 and 8 units. In the middle over here, a few clients were outliers here that bought 20 units, and a few clients bought 1 unit. And that gives me a nice way of looking at data. You can look at most data in that way, by the way. It's just a statistical analysis. And if you get your bell curve right, you will cover most of your clients. And then finally, I wanted to look at proxy data. And many of you will be familiar with this. We often referred to when you're looking at temperature or climate, where records only go back about 100 or 150 years. You can go back probably close to 1,000 years, even more, by looking at proxy data being tree rings. And proxy data is valid data. The example that I use is I had a client that was in high-end outdoor furniture. They wanted to open a new branch, and one of their sales guys noticed that a lot of the people arriving to purchase the furniture were driving high-end four-wheel drive vehicles. And we decided to use the data available on registrations of high-end four-wheel drive vehicles to figure out which suburbs were most likely to have these high income. So the number of vehicles registered at the central registry was a good proxy for clients that were likely to purchase because they were in the high income bracket. And that turned out to be quite a legitimate correlation, where I subsequently found something that says what your car says about salary, and you could see how people tend to buy a more expensive car if they're on higher salaries. I'll talk a little bit about the data analysis process. So it is a process. You go through the process of data collection. You then go cleanse your data, prepare it, start your analysis, do a little bit of modeling, and then finally you get these interpretation and insights. And to finish off, I'll give you an example. This is a few years old now, but certainly something that made my eyes become wide open in terms of the analysis of data in our own business. So we noticed a few years ago that our conversion rate for the XO piece of software was declining. You can see the decline from left to right. But at the same time, we noticed that the conversion rates for advanced software was also declining. You can see from left to right. And I couldn't fathom, I had no gut feel instinct of why this was happening. We went to look at the data and looked at Google Trends to see whether people had stopped searching on XO or stopped searching on advanced, and found that on XO, there was a tiny decline, but not enough of a decline to explain that drop in our conversion rates. And in advanced, there was a tiny increase, again, not completely contrary to looking at a decline in conversion rates. So we then started looking a little bit deeper. And we took an enormous amount of data and analyzed this with an online data analytical engine, and came up with an amazing thing that we were actually able to identify to the day when the behavior changed. And what had happened over here was on the 17th of November, XO leads fell, advanced leads spiked, and the conversion rate dropped. So having the data, we could now start looking at it and trying to draw these causal insights. What caused it? What caused this to happen? And we were able to find that there was a change in instructions to the team that was generating these leads. And it wasn't market-driven at all. It was simply an instruction where the demand generation team was told that they had to deliver more advanced leads and not to worry too much about the XO leads. So what they were doing is when a lead came in, it may not have been a good lead for advanced, but they were classifying it as advanced, which meant that our conversion rate would drop. And on the XO side, there were fewer leads that were being provided. In doing this, we also stumbled across what's called creator-based data. And this I mentioned in the beginning, of data that your database is accumulating in the back end. That you don't normally have visible. And we made that visible, and we were able to show that a particular employee was generating the best leads for us. So there was direct correlation between who the person was and the quality of the lead. So the leads generated by a particular employee that were referral leads created between the 9th and 15th of the month were significantly better than leads generated by the other 3 employees tagged as revitalized, created between the 8th and the 10th of the month. And by looking at that again, we were able to figure out that the incentive scheme within the teams had a particular cutoff date. And as the cutoff date for a particular employee's incentive date approached, they were tempted to push through more unqualified leads, and hence our conversion rates dropped. So that was just, I thought, a really interesting example of how data analysis helped us in our business to understand what was happening. To finish off, I can say, trust the data, but make sure you take into account the relevance, the accuracy, and the precision. Make sure that you're using it as a measure of your own gut instinct of what's happening in your business, and you can use it to make informed decisions and to uncover insights. And Grant, that is it from me. I'll hand back to you.